Welcome to Freedom to Know Wellness, a disability advocacy platform to hold space and give a voice to those with complex medical and chronic pain conditions, female reproductive challenges and miscarriages, and address other disability-related topics, including how these experiences affect one's mental health. I am your host, Michelle Samuels. Now, before we start, please remember to subscribe to the Freedom to Know Wellness channel at FTK Wellness to catch all of our content, and click the bell for notifications on new posts. If you enjoy our content, consider contributing financially to aid with the Freedom to Know Wellness production by clicking the @FTK Wellness PayPal link on our channel's page or found in the description box below. Every bit helps. Today, we are continuing our Uterine Fibroid Female Reproductive Health series with women sharing their personal stories with uterine fibroids and the measures they've taken to manage and/or get rid of these benign tumors. In our previous episode, we discussed fibroids and myomectomies, which is a surgical procedure to remove fibroids from the uterus while preserving the uterus. But in today's podcast, we are discussing the fibroid removal surgical procedure known as the hysterectomy. Hysterectomies are the most common and often enforced surgical procedure by practitioners to remove uterine fibroids. On our podcast, we will be hearing from one woman's journey on an enforced hysterectomy, but let's provide some context on the different forms of hysterectomies. There are 4 types of hysterectomy surgeries and their subforms. Number 1, partial hysterectomy, which removes the uterus body, leaving the cervix, fallopian tubes, and ovaries in place. Number 2, simple hysterectomy. These procedures removes the entire uterus and cervix. Number 3, hysterectomy with bilateral salpingo oophorectomy, also known as the total hysterectomy. This is the standard hysterectomy that removes the uterus, cervix, ovaries, and includes the fallopian tubes. And number 4, radical hysterectomy. This is a hysterectomy used for both fibroids and especially endometrial cancer. There are 2 forms of radical hysterectomy. Number 1 removes the uterus, cervix, ovaries, and fallopian tubes. And number 2 includes the removal of the surrounding tissues, upper vagina, and usually the pelvic lymph nodes. Prior to the early 2000s, a total hysterectomy was often the main surgery enforced by practitioners, as there was a concern of fibroid tumors becoming cancerous, which led to many women receiving total hysterectomies to avoid the possibility of cancer. We now know that the majority of fibroid tumors are benign, and science now provides a variety of surgical options, including different types of hysterectomies. But prior to the early 2000s, these total hysterectomy surgeries were aggressive both physically in appearance, as the cuts often left a garish scar. But the worst part was the drastic shift in hormonal health due to total hysterectomies, sending many women in their 30s and even late 20s into early menopause. The side effects of early menopause also had mental and emotional repercussions, managing a list of menopausal symptoms including hot flashes, brain fog, mood swings, vaginal dryness, loss of sexual arousal, and the possibility of early osteoporosis. Now, to combat the effects of this hormone deficiency, synthetic hormone replacement therapy medications were administered, medications such as Premarin. Now, here's the scoop on hormone replacement therapy, aka HRT, like Premarin. Premarin is made from horse urine. Yes, I said it, horse urine, from pregnant mares, and is solely estrogen-based, when the female hormone requires both estrogen and progesterone. The side effects of estrogen-only HRT includes the possibility of breast cancer, uterine cancer, blood clots, and stroke. Additional medications to replace the progesterone imbalance later had to be administered to balance the hormones, but there was always controversy surrounding Premarin. Since then, there has been advancement in balanced estrogen and progesterone HRT medications, but none are without its side effects. But that is for another discussion. So let's start our interview. Today's guest on the Freedom to Know Wellness, the podcast, is Shauna Stewart Douglas. Shauna experienced an emergency total hysterectomy when her doctors suddenly discovered a massive sized fibroid tumor, a tumor that was originally considered a cancer scare, but then was later confirmed to be a fibroid tumor. But nonetheless, this large fibroid tumor was considered life-threatening and required emergency surgery. But funny enough, Shauna is a woman who is on top of her health, getting her regular checkups with her gynecologist within that past year. So how did this large fibroid get missed? But we will let her tell her story to get all the details. But before we start, please remember that the information provided in this episode is from the opinions of the interviewee and interviewer. For further medical advice, please contact your practitioner. Now, let's begin the interview. I would like to welcome today's guest and fibroid warrior herself, Shauna Stewart Douglas. So, welcome to the Freedom to Know Wellness podcast, Shauna. How are you doing? And tell us a little about yourself.
I'm doing really wonderful. Thank you so much for
Good.
It's really wonderful to be here. Let's see here. My name is Shauna, as you said. And I'm a mom. I'm a business owner. I'm living here in Canada. And I'm feeling very looking forward to our conversation. And I think had some health ups and downs, but overall things are looking really positive.
And what part of Canada do you live?
In British Columbia. I am in the
Okay. Nice. And what kind of business do you run?
I am a fractional COO for online business coaches.
Awesome. So you've had, maybe a long-standing experience with uterine fibroids. Prior to being diagnosed, did you struggle with any type of female reproductive issues, such as PCOS, endometriosis, infertility?
Yes. I had quite painful periods probably for my whole life
Mm-hmm.
and kind of long periods as well. And then I also struggled with infertility and then secondary infertility as well.
Okay. So within the experience of struggling with infertility and dealing with those extreme type of periods, when they were doing any type of ultrasounds, nothing was showing up, any polyps, no fibroids, etc.
No, nothing was showing up. That
Wow.
was something that was, yeah, it was really very surprising. So, I mean, given the fact that I was going through fertility treatments, which are,
Hmm.
fairly, you're getting lots of scans constantly and blood
Yeah.
work and all the rest of it. And there was nothing that was showing up. There was nothing that was showing up at that point. Afterwards, I had a cyst. I had some pain on one of my ovaries, and I had some pain.
Hmm.
I had a cyst, but there was no even at that point no fibroids had shown up.
Okay. And they never understood what was the cause of the infertility.
No, it was just there was a couple of different factors, but not fibroids.
Okay. And so you had no underlying medical conditions outside of all of that.
No, I mean, outside of infertility, I had a extremely healthy pregnancy. I
Mm,
had a really, safe and fine birth process. All of that was very fine. It was just outside of the actual fertility part of the process.
yeah.
That was the issue.
Okay. So if I'm understanding correctly, you were struggling with infertility, then you were able to have a child, and
Yes.
then you tried to have another child afterwards, and then that's was secondary infertility that you're saying
Yes.
you experienced. Okay. All right then. And so how did that process, the secondary infertility, what was the process? Were you able to conceive, or what happened?
Yeah, so we did several rounds of IVF. So
Hmm.
when we got pregnant the first time, it was several rounds. I think it was 3 rounds of IUIs, and then we got pregnant the first time with IVF. And then
Hmm.
after that, I did IVF again a couple of times, and
Hmm.
it did not work. And so by that point, I had just realized that that was enough, and I didn't want to do any
Yeah.
more of that. So.
Yes, that makes sense. So, when did you find out that you have fibroids, and what was that process?
Well, I found out in it was a couple of years ago now, and what was
Mhm.
happening is I was noticing that once a month I was getting some swelling in my abdomen, and
Mhm.
it was starting to feel bigger. And I was very certain wasn't pregnant because
Mhm.
we knew that this was something that would have been a challenge. So I could
Right.
put something in there, but it just kept on going away. So I would kind of feel around when I was laying. I couldn't really feel anything when I was standing up, but when I was laying down, I could feel something in my stomach, or my lower abdomen, and then I would get my period and it would go away. So, given the fact that I had had painful periods for a long time, I had, that was something I was kind of familiar with. I had
Mhm.
been to the gynecologist actually about it was a little over a year prior to that, because
Mhm.
I was experiencing a period that would just kind of, it would come and then it would go and it'd be right back. It would be like I had two periods in the month, and it was
Mhm.
really quite uncomfortable. So I had gone to the gynecologist and I had been, I was examined then, and was said, they're like, I don't know. They just said, I don't know why it's happening. And this just happens to some women and we don't know what's going on. So because
Right.
of the fact that I had just been to the gynecologist, I was thinking like, this must just be more of my painful period life, I guess. And so
Right.
it kept on kind of really being noticeable every month. So I finally went to my GP and had
Mhm.
a ultrasound, and that was when it was found.
So when they found it, did they decide to just monitor the fibroid for a while, or did they realize that you need to have surgery right away?
Well, when they first found it, it was
Mhm.
it was a very dramatic, kind of learning of it. So I went
Mhm.
to my GP a couple of weeks later. I think a week later, I had an ultrasound, and then it was not long after that I got a call from my GP's office. I came in, and they were, because of the fact that I had just been to the gynecologist. This had grown to such a size so quickly. The immediate concern was that it wasn't just a fibroid. The immediate thought was that this was a tumor, this was cancer, this was
Oh, God.
something like this. So when the original conversation was, you need to just prepare yourself. It could be quite possible that you'll have a radical hysterectomy this weekend. Just make sure to start to kind of prepare yourself. So that was
Mhm.
the first part of the conversation, and then was kind of referred on to the gynecologist, and my case was referred on to specialists. And as they started to do kind of looking at it more, they were very, very sure that it most likely was not cancer. They couldn't completely rule it out because they weren't able to do a biopsy, but
Mhm.
they thought that most likely that is not what it is. Because of the size, it was quite large. It was, I mean, I could have left it, but because of the fact that I was not 100% sure that it wasn't cancer, I wasn't comfortable with that. Um,
Right.
because of the size, then it was just kind of known that it was going to have to be a hysterectomy, and it was, they weren't going to be able to just kind of remove it on its own. So yeah, it was very dramatic there for a while, and then
Yeah.
it calmed down a little bit.
So they didn't even bring up the idea of a myomectomy. Myomectomy. You weren't even a candidate for that.
No, no, it was quite large.
So how large, for example, like a watermelon, grapefruit, like an
It
extremely large grapefruit, like what size?
it was about the size of a small watermelon.
Jeez. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
Mhm.
Wow. And it's funny. When you mentioned that when you lie down, that was the only time you were able to see it. You weren't able to see it when you were sitting up. And if I remember you saying that you had an ultrasound even prior to discovering that you had the fibroids, and it wasn't visible. If you don't mind me asking, do you have a retroverted or anteverted uterus?
Wait, I have a antiverted, so
Yes.
just
Yes.
yeah.
So
Yeah, so
so
and they said that the reason why, that I guess it wasn't noticeable for so long was just because of the way that my overall pelvis just happens to be shaped. So
right.
when I was pregnant, I didn't show until almost, close to the end of my pregnancy, just the way that I happened to be shaped. It just wasn't.
Hmm.
And then for whatever reason, it would go away whenever I got, or it felt like it went away whenever I got my period. So it just, yeah, it was just really easily hidden.
Right, right. It's funny because the reason why I asked you is that a lot of times I've heard, and just myself, because I have a retroverted uterus,
Mm.
that it's harder to see the fibroids the size, the mass. A lot of things get hidden because it's at the back. Like a lot of times, people, like with women with retroverted or anteverted, they carry the pregnancy from the back, so it's harder to see. So yeah, I could just imagine how that's the size of a watermelon. That's intense. That is very intense.
It was, and it was kind of like, it was kind of embarrassing almost because I was
Mm,
thinking like, how is that even possible? Like, how can something that size be in my
mhm.
body and I not even know? I mean, I
No.
consider myself to be somewhat familiar with my body. I mean,
Yes.
you kind of think that you know what's going on, and then to get this information was really, yeah, it was really baffling. It feels like your body is letting you down, or
Mhm.
just don't have the right kind of concept or awareness. It was, yeah, it was really, it was unsettling. It was scary.
And you mentioned about being aware of your body. And to our listeners, by the way, Shauna and I, it's now called TMU, but back in the days it was called Ryerson University. And we graduated from the dance program. We're all professional dancers. So we're very aware of our bodies. So when she says that, I can completely relate to you in regards to understanding. We're very aware of what's happening in our bodies, just, whether it's physically or just intuitively. We're very connected. So yeah, I can understand that frustration and questioning.
Mhm.
But so now you are recommended, strongly recommended to be able to have the surgery. So after this, how long afterwards did you end up having the surgery?
So I found out about all of this. It was at the very beginning of the year. So it was around February. I had surgery
Mhm.
in May. So it was a relatively fast, it was really relatively fast process. I had first I had an ultrasound and I had a CT scan, I had an MRI just to check, like to kind of
Mhm.
get any more information. And then I was scheduled in for May. I was originally warned that it could be a wait, and it turned out that I was able to get a date that wasn't too far along, because of the fact as well that I was having like a fair amount of pain. It was uncomfortable, and
Mhm.
my period was really quite painful now as time was going on.
Yeah.
My nails were, I mean, not that this had an impact on surgery or anything, but
Mhm.
like my nails were like just gone. They were, I don't know if it was just all the everything was kind of out of balance and everything like that. So I was fortunate that I didn't have to wait too long.
So you were having extreme heavy bleeding, obviously.
Yes.
Yeah. So your nails were getting weak because of the lack of iron.
Hmm.
I know what that's like.
Yeah.
It's frustrating.
Very
So
frustrating.
But with the pain, so when you were having the painful periods, did they give you any type of prescription to be able to help you to manage, or were you just taking the over the counter Tylenol?
I was just taking over the counter Advil actually.
Advil. I was going to say not even the Tylenol. I was gonna say the Advil.
Yeah. Yeah, and I
Yeah.
used to sleep. I would have a bottle up on my like nightstand or
Yeah.
my desk drawers, and I would, you know how it lasts 6 hours, and so I would have
Yes.
it there. I would take it as long as I could. I would wait until as long as I could, and then I would take it, and then I would wake up in 6 hours because I was uncomfortable, and I would take another one, wait 30 minutes because that's how long it takes,
Yeah.
and then be able to fall asleep again. Like it was just, yeah,
No,
it was,
that's intense. That's
yeah.
intense. You actually probably required a stronger medication, but you stuck with the Advil until the surgery.
It didn't
Yeah.
even occur to me to ask. It didn't
Yeah.
occur to me to, yeah, it didn't occur to me that I needed to ask or that it was even an option. Like it just I
Yeah.
didn't.
Yeah. So, okay, now you went and had the surgery. The surgery was successful, from what I'm understanding. Your recovery period, what was your experience, I should say, with your recovery period? Just not just even physically first, but also mentally, emotionally. How was that for you?
Yeah. So physically, it went pretty well. I was
Hmm.
surprised by how long it took me to recover. So the doctor did tell me. She said that you're going to take 6 weeks. You really should take this 6 weeks. And I was like, 6 weeks? Come on, like this that sounds like a
Hmm.
really long time. And then no, I definitely needed 6 weeks, and it was physically draining. Like I was really exhausted. I would wear a belly band kind of thing, and that helped to make me feel
Hmm.
secure. I had a lot of pillows that were already always surrounding me. I had some pain medication that I was given
Okay.
as well that made me really dopey. It was very effective, but I mean, just eradicated all. efforts to kind of want to be able to do anything.
Yes.
So it was it was humbling. It was definitely humbling to kind of think, okay, I just need to sit around here and wait. So
Mm-hmm.
physically, that was how it went, and so that ended up having an impact kind of emotionally as well. And
Yeah.
it was kind of interesting because I was thinking when I went in for my 6-week post-op, I guess it was, I went in and, my the doctors had asking me a bunch of questions and kind of checking me and everything, and then I left and I said to my husband, I'm like, they really should ask some mental health questions at this point because honestly,
Yeah.
like I was not good. I was not doing well. Like I was.
Oh God.
It's like it's really hard. I mean, if you're used to just being in your life and doing what it
Mm-hmm.
is you do, and to all of a sudden not be able to do that, and for something like a fibroid, like it was just like, emotionally it had been kind of a lot for the those several months. And yeah, I was not in a good headspace. And I think I also kind of felt a bit down on myself for that as well, because I'm like, physically I'm good now, like I'm very lucky, very fortunate, like it could have been, it could all these could have beens, right?
Yeah.
And yeah, so I think emotionally it definitely took its toll. And then we talked about being, familiar with our bodies, and I was
Yeah.
not familiar with my body. All of a sudden, I couldn't really move, and
Mm-hmm.
I had weight that I wasn't used to, and I had, all of these things, and it really added up to, yeah, just made me think. I'm like, they really ought to have a more robust
Mm-hmm.
post-surgical, post-op checklist, basically.
Sorry, I'm going to go back a bit because I just remembered the type of hysterectomy that you had. You still
Mhm.
have your ovaries, but you had to remove the uterus, correct? Or did you have to remove the ovaries too?
No, I still have the ovaries,
Okay,
that were
good.
yeah, yeah, the tubes and the cervix, was removed.
Right. Yes. And, you know, um, there's an old, I know in a lot of First Nations community and also in African communities, and I'm assuming as well in European communities that we understand as women, there is a connection, yes, to the ovaries, but also to the uterus. That there's that emotional, spiritual connection. So, what I realize with women is that we have an emotional connection to our uterus. I don't know what exactly it is, but there's that, like, even when we go through certain stress, sometimes we feel pain in our uterus, and sometimes we can feel a sense of release. We can feel a sense of elation, ecstasy, what have you. So when they remove a uterus, whether
Mhm.
uterus or ovaries or all together, it's important, as you're mentioning, to ask about your mental health if there's that type of support. And so what you're mentioning is very on point in regards to that.
Yeah. I mean, there's a grieving process. I
Mhm,
was really very fortunate. I had a friend of mine who is a woman. She is a nurse, and she helped in pre and postnatal. And so she worked with a lot of pregnant women and kind of women after they had their babies.
mhm,
And she was having a conversation with me before, and she said, just something that people don't generally mention is the fact that you might really go through a grieving process, before the surgery or after. Speaking exactly to what you're just saying, Michelle,
mhm,
she's like, because we don't, it's just a part of our body. It's a part of who we are. And we don't really necessarily, sometimes we don't even think about it really. But
mhm.
then to all of a sudden be confronted with the reality that it's going to be gone. I mean, what does this mean? Like, what does this mean
Yes.
for you as a woman? What does this mean for you as a partner, as a mom
Mhm.
member? Like, what does this actually mean for you? And it was she was right. Like, because then I had another friend of mine. Her background is Cree, and she was talking about how this is like your uterus is your connection to the
Yes.
divine in a
Yeah, it
lot of
is.
this is where
Mhm.
life comes from, and they're taking it away.
Yes.
What does this mean for your connection to the divine or anything else? Like, what does that mean?
Yes.
And so it was really, um, yeah, it was, and then you have no reference point to know what after is going to be like. Like
Mhm,
this is just how you've always had it, and then what's going to be like? What is it going to be like after?
mhm, mhm.
So that was very confronting, and I definitely grieved in and for what I didn't know, you know?
Right, right.
Yeah.
You mentioned something about this weight. Can you expound on that? I'm kind of curious about what you meant in regards to the weight experience.
The weight of my body.
Yes, yes.
Yes. Well, I mean, I was, I was used to my body being a certain way and
Mm-hmm.
being a certain size and feeling a certain way. And
Yes.
then I had, then I'm having this surgery and an incision that was, I mean, quite sizable. And
Mm-hmm.
I had never had I didn't have a cesarean section, so I wasn't familiar with this. I hadn't had this
Right.
experience before. So all of a sudden I had this. So then I mean, my body is, it's sore. It's not flexible anymore,
Yeah.
right there because your body is protecting. And then I'm not moving very much. So I was, gaining weight. And then my clothes don't fit the same because there's an incision like where do you put your pants? Like little things
Mm-hmm.
like that.
Mm-hmm.
How do
Mm-hmm.
those actually fit? And then just getting used to my body trying to get that flexibility and being able to move, I guess, again. And then because
Yes.
of the fact that you're just feeling like I was feeling weaker, I just felt so slovenly. And I mean, like my bedroom is upstairs. So just kind of like
Mm-hmm.
getting upstairs and everything was just harder.
Yeah. And you're mentioning in regards to your pelvis, is feeling normal within your own pelvis. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. My husband made the comment as well that after, it's like I just didn't really move my torso. Like I just kind of kept it really still for a long time because I guess because I was trying to protect it and I was
Protect it.
just
Yeah.
feeling, I wasn't feeling very secure. And so I just kind of got stiff, afterwards just from moving in a different way.
And you're not used to being stiff at all. So yeah.
No. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, no, I'm just thinking of dance. I'm like, no, 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 no. She's not used to that at all. Exactly.
Oh,
Exactly.
no.
So with the incision, I know a lot of times as women, sometimes we can feel insecure even about our incisions. And you said you had a pretty large incision. How was the healing process with that? Was it a pretty easy? Some people use different means to be able to help heal. Like some people use tape for it to be able to dissolve better. Like what was your process?
Yeah, overall, I had a very good healing process. I
Yeah.
had some tape that was across. Um,
Hmm.
and then eventually when the tape came off, I had a friend of mine had given me some salves and things like that. So I was kind of
Hmm.
massaging into it, and that was really good. So overall, it was really good. Like I was just, made sure to keep it, dry for the first little while and
Hmm.
made sure to keep it clean. And so I was very fortunate. I didn't have any kind of complications or anything. I hadn't really thought about the fact that in addition to the incision on the outside, there would be so many stitches on the inside. So I remember at one point kind of going to get up and it felt like a little bit of a pop. It didn't hurt exactly. It just kind of felt like, and it was just this reminder going, oh yeah, there's a lot, there's a lot going on.
Yes.
It was kind of
Yes.
calmed down, but it was, overall, really good, and I didn't have any complications.
Okay. Okay. So you were mentioning in regards to your husband observing, how you were moving, how you were feeling. Did some men don't share anything, and I
Mm,
believe a lot of men are just focusing on being supportive when their
mhm,
wife is going through an experience like this. But did he share like anything in regards to, how this hysterectomy would affect him? Did it also, the other question is, did it also affect your sexual health? Because sometimes for some women that can be an effect afterwards. How was his experience?
mhm. His experience was overall very positive. He was just very focused on. I mean, he was scared. Afterwards, he told me he was like,
Mhm.
"Holy smokes! Like that was really scary, especially at the
Mhm.
beginning. Like I didn't want to say anything, but that was like really scary." And so he was scared. He's really, really good at being able to, he was a really great advocate. So he came with me to all the appointments. And so he was really good
Wonderful.
asking all the questions. And, it doesn't bother him if people are like ready to wrap it up. And if he still has 12 more questions, he just keeps going. So that was
Good
great
for him.
in that context. It was fantastic. And he was just really, he was very, very supportive. And he was just, I mean, the great thing is too, like he doesn't care about any physical anything. So
Right.
he was like, "You've got a scar." I mean, I've like I've shown the kids my scar, and I'm like, "This is cool, you see, because this means like I went through something and I got to the other side, so this is cool." So like, okay, that's
You're a
cool.
warrior.
Yeah, I'm a warrior. Exactly. This is awesome. So we kind of try to talk about it that way. And then as far as the sexual health and stuff as well,
Yes.
that was a question too, because I mean I had my cervix removed as well, and so I'm like, I mean, how is that going to impact things? And I
Yeah.
mean, fortunately for us, it didn't. It
That's good.
didn't have a negative impact.
Okay, so I just realized I didn't ask the question in full. I was trying to ask, how was his experience? But, and you pretty much touched on it. How was your experience knowing, okay, this has happened, my cervix been removed, my uterus removed. How do I manage sexually with my husband? But as you
Mhm.
said, you had no issues, there was no insecurity, it just went down good. All right,
Yeah,
it's
everything
wonderful.
Everything, yes, everything was fine. I mean, I can't say, I mean, again, like, trying to get reacquainted with your body and,
Yeah,
is everything going to be the same? And it was really really very positive. So
good.
yeah, that's good.
No, that's a good thing. No, because everyone's different, but it's like that question: how are things going to work out? But some people hold on to that insecurity, and some people said, you know what, screw it, I'm going to try it. Let's go at it. So I'm glad things worked.
They
That
did.
is good. That is
Mhm.
good. So, now, how many years has it been since you've had the surgery?
It is now 4 years.
4 years. Okay.
Mhm.
And how long before you felt like, was it a year that until you felt that you were more inclined with your body? Or like, what was how in the 4 years, how has been your healing process?
I would say that it was probably a little about 6 months later. I felt
Mm-hmm.
like I'm like, okay, I can kind of do things. I
Mm-hmm.
I was not as strong as I had been. I was not as flexible as I had been.
Mm-hmm.
I was kind of a slightly altered version of, a healthy version of myself. It was around 6 months later that I decided that I needed something to kind of work towards. So I decided, for some crazy reason, I decided to start running, which I don't like running at all, but I just had this in my head. This is what I was going to do.
Mm-hmm.
So I started doing that. And then that like kind of helped me to give me a goal and to kind of help me feel like I was the one who had agency and power over my body again, not just,
Right.
medical professionals or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
So there was that. And then but then it was honestly probably it took a little while longer, and I think maybe this is just like an emotional thing for me. It was another year, I think, until I really started to feel like, okay, now I'm back to just, whether I'm back to how I was before, or this is me now, and this is good, and I'm just going to move forward. It
Yes.
took me a while to kind of get back to get back to myself. Like now, how I am now, where I am now. Now I feel like this is me. I feel like normal, whatever that
Mm-hmm.
means.
Yes.
So I feel but it took me a while.
Okay, okay. And you did mention in regards to your doctors, they treated you well. They didn't make you feel like not supported, at least for the most part.
Oh yeah, definitely. There were, especially because of how it started out.
Mm-hmm.
My GP was very concerned that that this was not a good situation. So I mean, immediately there was, I mean, specialists looking, and kind of I got a lot of eyeballs really fast on my
Mm-hmm.
file and on my case. So, and then after that, kind of moving through everything, I felt like I had the opportunity to ask all the questions that I needed. And again, with my husband really being really good with all of
Mm-hmm.
that stuff as well, um, I felt taken care of. And I mean, even for things like, for example, um, just from my own experience, I was very nervous about cancer, and if that's what
Mm-hmm.
was going on. And so I was given the option. So my doctor said, she said, well, so we're going to have a CT scan just to kind of like be able to see if there's kind of anything
Yes.
else there, if anything has spread or anything like that. And then you have an option for an MRI. It's up to you. Do you want to? And I said yes, because I was like, I'm like, will that give us more information,
Mm-hmm.
definitive information? And she said yes, it would. And so
Yes.
so that felt really good. I didn't feel like I had to, fight or anything like that to get information or to get access to help or support. So
I remember you mentioning that you had a YouTube channel that was advocating about your experience with uterine fibroids. Tell us a
Mhm.
little bit about that.
Sure. So I had done a video. I did a couple of videos on
Hmm.
YouTube, just kind of ex- sharing my experience. So I had built a community for moms when my oldest was born several years ago, and so I wanted to be able to communicate and share what was going on, knowing that there would be a lot of other women who were going through the same, but perhaps wouldn't feel comfortable saying anything about it or asking any questions. So
Hmm.
I just wanted to give them a heads up, and also because I was going to be probably indisposed for a bit, and I just wanted to be
Hmm.
able to let them know why. So it ended up being great because I went ahead, I shared what it was that was going on. I shared before I knew 100%. Like, I didn't share until I was fairly sure that it was, not just a fibroid, but just not cancer, because that's originally
Hmm.
what. So I shared after that point. But I was still kind of emotional because I hadn't had the surgery yet, and I wasn't 100% sure. And so I was still quite nervous and kind of scared. So it ended up being like a bit emotional, but it ended up kind of sparking a lot of conversations, which was really, really great. So I've had a lot of women, reach out because they knew, because I was comfortable, stating publicly that I was having a hysterectomy and this is what was going on.
Right, right.
Ended up having, since a lot of women being like, okay, I'm going to have a hysterectomy. What can I expect? And so being able to share some of those experiences, share some of those experiences, which is very humanizing and just comforting for me and for them, I hope. So, um,
Yes.
yeah, so it's been nice in that way.
I was just thinking about in regards to that, you're able to share your experiences with them. So at least if anything's missing, because yours was a severe case, if
Mm,
anything's missing, you can be able to advocate and say, okay, you need to have this done. And the reason why I'm saying this, you mentioned about having the MRI before you had the hysterectomy.
mhm,
I'm not too sure if that's something that is standard now for before you have a hysterectomy, if you have to have an MRI, and I hope so.
mhm,
I had a conversation with another uterine fibroid warrior, and we were talking about that. Um, like for example, for the longest time, they didn't know you had the fibroid, and it grown so big.
mhm,
And I was addressing to her that having an ultrasound, even a sonohystogram, never really saw the amount of fibroids that I had, for
mm,
example. It
mhm,
wasn't until I had an MRI that they saw the whole thing was encased in fibroids. And one of the things I was mentioning to her that, I mean, MRIs we know can be expensive. They are expensive in general. But for women's reproductive health, especially when it comes to fibroids, like of having even possible annual or every 2 years for women to have an MRI of the uterus, because a lot of things are going misdiagnosed,
mhm,
even ovarian cancer, things
mhm,
like that people are not able to see, but the MRI gives a full spectrum of what's happening, a full view of what's happening to the uterus. But we're realizing that the ultrasounds are failing. I
mhm,
have to say the word failing because they're not seeing everything. You
mhm.
had a size of a watermelon, and what was it? How many months prior you had an ultrasound and they didn't see it?
Yeah, exactly. That was like about a year. I mean, it
Oh,
was
come
huge.
on. Yeah.
Yeah,
It had to be there.
it had
And
to be.
so and I kept thinking, my God, you could have had the opportunity for a myomectomy,
Mm,
but it had grown that big, you
exactly.
know?
And then that's part of the question too. It's like,
Yeah.
why? Why is this happening? Why is it when also you hear about the fact that, what is the statistic for like the chances of a woman having fibroids and the chances of a woman having hysterectomy some point in their life? Like, it's astronomically high. It's like
Yes, it
super high.
is.
Why is it standard that women are going to lose an entire organ in their life? Like,
Yes.
why is that standard? I mean, I find it really hard to believe that if this was happening to the male side of the population, that they say, listen, over half
Yes.
of you are going to have your testicles removed at some point. Like,
Yes.
just deal with it. Like, I really don't
It's like
feel
it's nothing. Yeah.
it's no big deal. It's like, yeah, exactly. It's like you're just kind of removing, like a skin tag or something. Like, this is an organ. This is, and just like we spoke about before. I mean, like, culturally, emotionally, psychologically, there's a lot of reasons why you don't want to go ahead not only because of the fact that it's like it's invasive, but also any
Yes.
kind of surgery is a danger to go into and to kind of like subject someone to, not only that person, but then
Mm,
people have complications. I mean, it's just it's boggles my mind that
it does.
it's like it's standard and it's fine, and that even like a lot of research isn't even done to it. Sorry, I'm like getting going here. Before I had mine,
Please go ahead.
I was doing like all this research, trying to find out everything
Yeah.
else. The most research that I could find, or the most kind of online discussion that was happening and research, was about sex after. So I was like, interesting. The thing that was going to impact men the most in this entire thing,
Mm-hmm.
everybody happens to be talking about and making a big thing about. What about me? What about my body? What about like all the changes that are going to happen? Like, what about
Yes.
me?
Yes.
It's unreasonable. It's ugh.
There's not enough research out there. There really isn't. I
Mm-mm.
mean, even when I'm doing research myself and I'm thinking, I'm looking at the whole understanding of uterine fibroids on a whole. And I'm looking at the percentage of Canadian women that have fibroids, right? And so we're showing it. And I'm looking at even culturally wise, because statistic wise, Black and brown women, so Black and South Asian women, have the highest rates of uterine fibroids.
Mm.
This information, last time I that they did research on this was 2012, and it was only 3 medical studies. And I'm looking for medical studies. I'm just looking for all these medical studies on uterine fibroids with women and
Mhm.
why automatic like our parents' generation, it was automatic hysterectomy.
Yeah.
There was no like my mother had me, and then it was like, oh well, she was pregnant with me with fibroids. And
Mhm.
that's how she found out she had a fibroid.
Okay.
And they were like, nope, we're going to do the set surgery and it's automatic. Oh, you have to have a hysterectomy. I'm thinking, what do they understand the significance of the uterus and
Yeah.
the connection to it? As you said, men, if they said, oh, you're going to remove your testicles, is no big deal. You can live without it.
There's no
No.
way that would happen.
No, 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 no. And
Oh,
as you mentioned, the sexual health. Okay, men are saying, "Oh, well, the women are not, feeling the same," and the women are like, "Sometimes we don't feel the same." I've heard women say, "You know what? My sexual drive kind of went off once I had the hysterectomy. Does my
yeah.
husband understand?" I know women where she had to bring her doctor into I'm sorry, bring her husband into the doctor's office to be able to discuss this is what's happening to her, because there's that disconnect of
Yeah.
explaining what is actually happening.
Yeah.
It's not a skin tag, as you said.
Exactly. It's also like, when you think about like what it is that that piece of like, material, flesh in your body
Yes.
is doing, it's holding up all of your organs.
Yes. That
And then to go,
support. Yeah.
that supports that. And so now we're having to compensate and then still just kind of like stomp around in our lives in the way that we always have, when
Yeah.
like why aren't you doing all the same physical things? Well, because this whole hammock that was keeping all of my organs up isn't there
Yes.
anymore. So
Exactly.
yeah, it's
I've
it's
seen
it's so frustrating.
I've seen women even talk about, even their shape, like the way they're naturally physically built and
Mhm,
the way they can be able to walk or physically, just even their shape in general
mhm.
completely changes because the organs have to compensate,
Yeah,
and I, I mean, it happens. It's part of life,
mhm,
and of course, there's certain things like, ovarian cancer and all of these things where people have to have the hysterectomy. It's important. It's a lifesaver. And even for us with the fibroids,
mhm.
it may be, as I call it, a big rock in your uterus, but at the same time, it causes pain. You're popping down the Advils like there's no tomorrow. You're losing blood, your nails. It is affecting our health, but it's happening so rapidly.
Yeah.
And why?
Why?
Why is it happening so much?
Yeah.
Especially when I look at North America, from based
Mhm,
on what I saw in regards to statistics, it's like, why are we having? Is it something in the food? Is it in the environmental products that we use? Yes. But as I was saying, that why are we having so much of these xenoestrogens
mhm,
in the environment, and it's affecting us?
mhm. Hugely.
Yeah.
Like, how many people do you know? Like, in from the small town that I am from in
Mhm.
Northern British Columbia, Prince George, BC,
Yes.
I know so many women who have had infertility issues, who
Hmm.
had tumors in their body, have had cervical cancer, have had uterine cancer, have had all kinds of cancers that they've had, and fertility issues, tumors, all of this. Why is that happening? Why is it so concentrated? Why? I mean, is this standard? Like, was it standard that everyone from all age categories, this has always been happening? It seems highly suspect to me that so many people, so many women
Right.
are dealing with this. Exactly to your point, like what is happening and why is there not more data on this? Why is there not
Yes.
information on this? Why is there not an inquiry? Why is this not interesting?
And if that is happening in your small town, there's something that must be happening. Like, you know how they say there's something in the water? Like,
Mhm.
there's something happening that's affecting that community because for that to have that much high rates of cancer and different, all these different type of tumors, no, 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 no. There's something going on there. That is suspect.
I agree.
Wow.
Mhm.
Wow. Sorry, you have me thinking. You have me thinking. But
Yeah.
and along with you mentioned that you did a lot of research prior to having your surgery. Was a certain website, social media sites? Can you mention a few of them that supported you through?
Absolutely. There was a website that I really liked. It was called Hister Sisters. And the first
Yes.
time I had
Yeah.
ever heard that term, I loved
Yeah.
it. It was really fantastic, and one of the things I really liked about that website was that it just had a lot of resources, and it had this, I don't know if they still have this, I hope that they do. It was a great resource. When you signed up, they sent you this PDF, and it was just this list of, what to do in the, 8 weeks before, and then this timeline, and then what to kind of get. You can get a belly band, you can do this, you can do that, and then what to expect afterwards. I mean,
Hmm.
right down to things like that was where I got the suggestion to get a belly band, and that would be helpful, and how to arrange your pillows. Even things like to expect the fact that you're going to have a lot of gas, and so that's just. I mean, I didn't know that. I had no idea that. I'm so glad
Yeah.
I read that. Um, all those kinds of things. That was a resource that I thought was really valuable.
You know, it's funny because I'm listening to some of the resources that they provided for you.
Mhm.
Why is this not provided from a medical doctor? Is this a list of things to do post surgery?
Exactly.
These things, I remember, like, and this is the importance of websites like this, or even, and I can say, in the holistic or, more the holistic naturopathic type of treatments. Um, if you go back to speak to your grandmother or your great grandmother, that type of information was often provided, even for example, after you've had a baby. They used
Mm,
to do the banding, you
yeah.
know?
Mm.
And these are the things I knew my grandmother and great grandmother talked about. And it made sense. As soon as you said that, I said, oh, yeah, they do that after they have a baby. That would be able to hold it, that banding technique. All this information is pertinent and it's helpful. And yeah, the History Sisters is a really good website. But why aren't we getting this from our medical practitioners? Is it not enough time? A basic write up?
I know, it was a checklist, and that I had my
Yeah.
little printout, and I would go into the doctor, and those are the questions I was asking. Like,
Good for
why
you.
yeah, like, it'd be so easy, and also just from a care perspective, it would make me
Yeah.
feel so much more like, "Okay, relax," like, if they're providing this information, if they're saying, "These are the kinds of things that you should be checking into," I mean,
Hmm.
it doesn't cost anything. They've got all kinds of pamphlets in there. I mean,
Yeah.
having kind of one more, I think, would have been hugely valuable.
So they have the pamphlets that's probably marketing for another company, but the basic information that you need for recovery is not provided.
Exactly.
Interesting. Interesting. So you mentioned the mommy website that you have. So just for our listeners who are out in BC, what was the name and what was the link for the website or the URL?
Yes, it is. Well, see, it's a series of communities, and it's a little bit long. So just let me. I'll have to grab. What is it? It is so. But the community is called Momble, and so if you go on Facebook and you go MOMMBLE,
Hmm.
you'll see a Facebook page, and go to the community section, and you'll see a number of the communities there.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Well, Shauna, I just want to thank you so much for your time and just to be able to share your story. It's very significant and it's a wonderful experience. In this, when I say wonderful, it's because you went through the journey, but you really advocated for yourself. You did your own research. Because a lot of times as women, we just go into the doctor's office and we just say, okay, you know what? The doctors know best.
Mhm.
But you have to make sure advocate for yourself and that your husband also advocated for you. He went in there and he's like, no, I'm going to ask my questions. I like that. So, but
Mm.
overall, I just want to thank you for your time. I really appreciate you sharing your story. And it was wonderful having you today. So I just want to say again to our listeners, reading information is one thing, but listening through a lived experience is another and paramount. And that's what we do here at Freedom to Know Wellness. Thank you and have a great day. Be well. Thank you again, Shauna, for being on the Freedom to Know Wellness podcast. Shauna had vlogged her fibroid hysterectomy journey. To follow her story, find the links provided in the description box below and connect with her Mumble Mothers Support Group at www.mumble.com and on their Facebook group page at Moms Uniting Moms/groups. For further information on uterine fibroids, hysterectomies, and subjects alike, follow our blog at www.freedomtoknowwellness.substack.com and follow Freedom to Know Wellness podcast on our YouTube channel at FTK Wellness, Spotify, Anchor, Apple Podcasts, and Google Podcasts. Thank you again and be well.